Welcome, nobody, no one, and never persons, to episode 413 of an Unearthly podcast, streaming live on the 27th of July, 2021, and featuring Big Finish's Neverland, written by Alan Barnes and starring Paul McGann as the Doctor, India Fisher as Charlie Pollard, and Lala Ward as President Romana. I am Bill Sylvia, the writer in black, and with me are Randy Ronson McCulloch
Once again, doing technical duty. I might be getting better at it.
and Thomas Fireheart.
We set it off stream, but yeah, it's kind of funny how timely this was to watch.
Mad Matt is still feeling under the weather, so please send him any good wishes you have or any belief systems you may follow. And with any luck, knocking on wood, he'll be with us next week, hopefully.
Yep. I talked to him earlier today. Mostly his problems seem to be gastric distress, which is a COVID symptom. He tried taking Pepto-Bismol for it. It did not help. Or if it did, not by much. His whole family has it. His mother is now in the hospital on oxygen and has been for the last 2 nights. His father doesn't have many symptoms, but seems to be drained and basically tired, unable to move for large periods of time. Oh, God. Like I've said before, I'm glad this was not me that got it, because I would be dead. So how's everybody else's week been?
I've been all right. Today was one of those days where, so I don't want to give out too many details, especially since my real name is on here, and I don't want to inadvertently trash anybody I might need to work with. But basically, a lot of events over the past year have shifted to online with no training or preparedness. And one that I'm involved with seems to be having enough issues that I got one of those types of emails both first last night and then a similar one this morning that just puts you in a bad mood all day. And even though it was resolved, it was one of those days where I had planned to leave the house. I had planned to do housework, and I pretty much just I ordered breakfast delivery, took a nap, ordered pizza for dinner, and I pretty much just tried to veg away the bad energy all day.
Yeah, I had a friend that had that problem earlier this week. I think on Sunday. As for me, I learned I should read a recipe a little more clearly. I was working on my blackened chicken recipe, a recipe I developed myself, but I was following it. Only I misread when it came to adding the chili powder. It's supposed to add half a teaspoon, and I added half a tablespoon.
There was a little too much capsaicin for your gut.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. I've spent 36 hours in gastric distress. I barely slept that night because my stomach was hurting so bad. And I usually go to game the next day. I'm just like, nope.
I'm guessing chili powder tends to be a bit more concentrated than the chipotle powder that I use in a lot of recipes.
Well, all spices depends on what you're cooking. I was cooking shrimp. And I was not cooking as much shrimp as I did when I made the recipe, so actually I should have been dialing back the spice.
Gotcha. But yeah, the first thing my brain went to was a week or two ago I was following a recipe for it was like a honey chipotle chicken, and I thought I was supposed to put a full 2 tablespoon packet of chipotle powder into the breading for the chicken. And it turned out I was only supposed to put like a teaspoon of it in there. And other than the chicken being, spicier than intended, which was great for me because I loved it. I had no ill effects. But I don't know how chili powder differs from chipotle powder.
Well, mind you, you were also using it on chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the difference. If you think about chicken, there's a lot of area of the chicken in the middle that works as a buffer.
A lot of fatty tissue that can absorb it.
A lot of fatty tissue that can absorb it. A lot of meat that, is still going to be unseasoned because all you're really doing is spicing the surface.
Right.
And now think of a shrimp. Doesn't have a lot of space inside.
Especially if they're shelled first.
Yeah. So the surface area to interior ratio is a lot smaller, therefore a larger percentage of it gets spiced. And that's what happened here. I used virtually the same recipe with the mistake making my grilled chicken breasts today. And those came out fine. A bit, when you eat it, but it's not, giving me digestion issues. It was only because it was the small amount of shrimp. So, it's things like that you have to take into account when you're cooking.
Good to know. I do not cook much seafood at all, so that sort of difference would not have even occurred to me.
Well, if you ever do decide to cook seafood, talk to me first, because
Okay.
there's a whole technique to it that I've only recently learned. That makes it a lot easier to cook. I just did a stupid thing. I looked down and I misread something. Had I used the proper one, it would have been a bit spicy, but okay. Like I said, I was cooking with a smaller amount of shrimp this time. But that mistake, coupled with cooking with the smaller shrimp, just absolutely made that dish almost toxically hot. Because chili powder was not the only thing I was adding. I was adding chili powder. I was adding cumin. I was adding cayenne pepper. I was adding Cajun spice. So yeah, this was everything kind of cooking together into a whole holy shit sludge of death.
Has it passed, or is it still bothering you?
It's largely passed. I ate my usual grilled chicken sandwiches today without issue. We'll see how they are after the spice grows for a day in the fridge. Because I make 8 breasts, and I basically eat 2 sandwiches on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Usually I eat out on Mondays because I go to game. And Saturdays is always a toss-up on what I'm going to do.
How about you, Thomas?
Not much really happened on my end, though yesterday I was informed that something that I'd essentially been bugging work about for a year, to be like, well, this thing needs doing. Just give me a shift on Mondays and rearrange me so I'm not working Thursdays anymore, and give me a Friday shift and I can just do it. And then you're only having to pay me for an extra shift. And now they've turned around and gone, oh, we're just going to get one person to do it, 20-hour week, but you needed a license and a car. And I don't have a license and a car, so I can't even apply for it.
Shit.
So it's like, well, fuck me for suggesting anything then. And it's funny as well, because I always just thought, like, you couldn't even just ask any of the other people who work there whether they wanted it first and then put a thing out. And also, we're understaffed on the Thursday nights I work anyway, so it's like, okay, so you'll get someone for that. You still haven't got anyone for Thursday nights yet to make it so we have a full roster. So yeah, that's about as far into that as I'm gonna go. So don't right. But it's just like it is one of those things where it's just like, well, you know, I mean, even my dad was saying it's like, careful what you wish for, sort of a thing. Like here I am
Mhm.
presenting them a cheap alternative of how to do it, and then they're like, nope, we're just going to
Yeah,
employ an extra
but
person for a 20-hour
it
week.
it would make one of their workers happy, and they can't have that.
All right. So, on tonight's show, we've got some birthdays, we have a bit of news, we have some geek talk, and then we have our episode summary, which was supposed to be Matt. Unfortunately, as we've said, Matt is unable to do this. Um, Thomas, you watched it a couple of times. Do you think you could piece together a summary?
Yeah, Bill asked me while you were
Yeah,
away before we started, and
yeah, and I forgot
I've
to confirm it
agreed to give
before
it
we
a shot.
started. So yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
I've agreed to give it a shot. Yeah.
okay. Well, that's all of us ever do is give it a shot.
And we were also talking. He's watched. He's going to be giving this summary without having watched the only story in which Rassilon appeared before this, which is the Five Doctors. So it'll be a whole new take.
All right, and then of course our episode review, our final thoughts, and our ratings. So moving on to birthdays. The first birthday is July 25th, and that is the birthday of Cyril Luckham, who played the White Guardian from 1978 and again in 1983. He would have been 114, but he died in 1989 at 81, understandably. On the 26th is one of our honorary references. That's Nana Visitor, who played Olivia Cassandro in Torchwood Miracle Day, is better known for playing Kira Nerys on Deep Space Nine. She turned 64. And finally, the same day is the birthday of Bob Baker, writer, co-creator of K9. He turned 82. So happy birthday, Cyril, Nana, and Bob. Moving into news, some people may or may not be aware that there was a panel recently.
It was San Diego Comic-Con was this past weekend. The idea of weekends has kind of been thrown to the wayside with virtual conventions.
And during this panel, they showed a trailer for the upcoming season of Doctor Who. Who here has seen the trailer?
I've seen the teaser once.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Teaser trailer.
Yeah.
They're calling it
Yeah,
a
I-
trailer.
Yeah.
It felt more like a teaser to me.
It does not have enough information for me to consider it having crossed the line to trailer.
Yep.
It has more information if you missed the panel than if you saw the
Yeah.
panel, but it's still I don't think it even gives the name of the character that it introduces. So
Mm.
So I believe Bill watched the panel.
yeah. And Thomas said that he watched some of it.
Like of the almost 40 minutes it is, I probably watched about half, I think.
Okay.
I unfortunately was otherwise occupied.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me what you think or what you learned.
So the teaser introduces a character by the name of Vinder. He is played by Jacob Anderson, who most people will recognize him. Well, maybe not recognize because his appearance is very different, but know his name from his work as Grey Worm in Game of Thrones. I'm sure Chris Chibnall knew him as an actor who was in 6 episodes of, say it with me now, Broadchurch.
Oh, of course. He's going right back to his...
His well. But so what I found really interesting in he was not able to physically be with the other cast members for the panel for whatever reason. But one thing I found interesting that he mentioned is one he has his own ship. He was excited about the buttons and levers on it. and he also mentioned being excited about the buttons and levers on the TARDIS, which implies that either he takes a trip aboard the TARDIS during an episode for whatever reason, or is an actual third companion. They have not given any hint one way or the other, but he has been aboard the TARDIS set for one reason or another.
Well, yeah.
Well,
Remember that Captain Jack Harkness started with a ship and wound up a companion on the TARDIS. So.
Right.
mm,
So it could be like that, or it could be more like Thomas Edison took a trip aboard the TARDIS and then was
yeah.
unceremoniously returned whence he came.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Chibnall did also say that uh some of the guest actors would be in more than one episode, so
Yep.
it also could be something like that as well.
I believe he is stated that he's in multiple episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
He suggested, or Chibnall suggested, that there were a lot of characters, which I guess any season should have a lot of characters, but that there were
yeah.
that, as Thomas mentioned, there are multiple recurring characters that haven't been revealed yet. This
Mm,
might mean something like Unit or Torchwood, or it might mean something like the crew at like the families of the companions that we sometimes see, or it might be
mm,
uh, owing to the fact that they suggest that it's one long story. I still feel that that's pretty much what they said in series 11, and I have reason to doubt that it's more specific than that.
mm,
Particularly, my doubts come from the fact that one, they mentioned that there will be new monsters, and two, they mentioned that this was they kept looking over at Chibnall to see if if he was going to signal the snipers or not. But that there was an old monster that they were very excited that they worked with,
mm,
which I'm guessing means someone that they haven't worked with before, neither Daleks nor Cybermen. So
mm,
I'm kind of curious as to what speculation there is out there.
mm,
In terms of the new monster, the one hint that Chibnall was willing to give when this would have been at the very end of the panel, I don't think Thomas would have seen it. Everybody was giving one adjective or one word that described the season, and they were like mysterious and exciting and things like that. And then Chibnall wrapped it up with the word swarm. So you might have seen a few headlines about that because that was by far the most cryptic response, and it might suggest what one of the new monsters is like.
The Wyvern, maybe,
mm.
or the Wern. I forget what they were called. The ones that inhabited the Ark. The big bug
Ah,
creatures.
Ah, the green plastic wrap.
When they were in larva form, yeah, but
Mhm.
they looked like giant insects. Other than that,
Right.
and it makes you wonder what a CGI retouch would do to those.
Mhm.
mm.
Well, their larva wouldn't be literally made of spray painted bubble wrap for starters.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Not unless the
um,
BBC has lost even more budget.
um, yeah, like I know I'm not holding my breath necessarily on what exactly one story means, but at least for the moment, with nothing to really like go by, I'm basically under the assumption until proven otherwise that I'm going into this thinking it's more like Key to Time or
Mm.
Trial of a Time Lord, where there are like
Mhm.
there's one thing that links everything,
Right.
but otherwise they are individual
Mhm.
things, sort of
I,
like that,
another
or
thing that comes
closer
to
to that.
another thing that comes to mind is Series 6, aka the Season of River Song, which is
Hmm.
basically telling one story of the impossible astronaut, but it's otherwise not particularly less episodic than other seasons.
Hmm.
Well, we'll have to see.
Right.
Yeah. Or I'm expecting it to be like a full season, a full series of like what they did at the very start of series 11, where like it's essentially the cliffhanger at the end of The Woman Who Fell to Earth directly
Uh-huh.
leads into the next episode
And that,
without it being a two-parter.
and actually, that is relevant because they did say all of them pretty much said there'd be a lot of cliffhangers in the upcoming season. So these are not just going to neatly wrap up and then you rely on a trailer to get excited. There's going to be cliffhangers to keep you interested week to week. Which I wonder if, because I think there was rumbling about ratings, if that might have been a mandate from above.
Could be, but I mean, it was funny though because when I saw someone point out, um, well, Broadchurch was only 8 episodes per series, so it's like, okay, if Chibnall's stuck with 8 episodes for this, then I can see him going, well, I mean, an 8 episode continuous story of some kind is something I'm used to, so why not?
Yeah, that might be what he's doing.
Mhm.
We'll have to
Like,
see.
Right.
hmm.
This article that you linked to, Randy, it did remind me that Centaurans have been confirmed in the season. I don't know if Centaurans are the type of thing to get our TARDIS crew actors really excited, as excited as they were in the panel. But maybe if it was a really good episode, that's what they were talking about.
Maybe.
I'm guessing it's Centaurans and someone else. Um,
Hmm.
Silurians would not shock me since I know Chibnall has written Silurians before.
Yeah, but I can't
Hmm.
see Silurians defined as a swarm.
No, I think Swarm is the new whatever new monster he introduces. To be honest,
Ah,
I could be way off. I could be way off the mark there.
Yeah.
But if I hear that and my guess is that he's introducing something insectoid. Again, there's nothing to confirm that. That's just where my head goes.
Hmm.
we'll have to see.
Mhm. I do see the article you linked to shows a still of that I hadn't seen of what looks like some sort of robo walkers or like ATSTs that appeared during the season. I have no idea what those are, but they look kind of interesting.
Now, those I could see as a swarm.
Hmm.
Because, yeah, they look like mechanical insects. What if the mechanoids went bug, you know? That kind of thing.
Right. One thing I just wanted to mention that I found kind of funny from the panel, it doesn't really tell us anything about the season. But they mentioned how normally when you're doing night shot for a show, um, the locals kind of just grumble and kind of hope you hurry up and get on with it so that they can get back to driving through that neighborhood again. Whereas they would show up to film a night shot for Doctor Who completely unannounced, and then within a couple of hours, people would start showing up in like costumes and like full on cosplay just to gather around the filming and try to catch a glimpse of whatever they were filming.
Yeah! You go into a neighborhood with a bunch of geeks and you start filming their show, and oh yeah, it's cause for an immediate convention.
Yeah, I'm sure if Star Trek did location filming, we would hear the same thing.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
The thing is, it becomes annoying for the directors because he wants to make sure none of these people get in the shot.
Yeah, especially if they're making noise.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And I think even part of that, I'm pretty sure I remember that bit, and that was John Bishop saying that, and that was also him just being surprised that they were able to find where they were.
Oh
Because
yeah.
he's just like, what the fuck? These people, like, we showed up to this place with no warning or whatever.
That's
And
because
here are these people coming out of the woodwork.
that's
And he
social
was
media
very
for you.
amazed.
Somebody will notice that it's Doctor Who being filmed. They'll slap a picture, throw it on Twitter.
And
A
and now
dozen other people in the area will see it, and they'll text a dozen other people each.
and nowadays you can be like, oh, I'm in I don't know freaking neighborhoods in Britain. I'm in downtown Cardiff. Add that check into the Instagram story of downtown Cardiff with a picture of the TARDIS. And yeah, people will just start showing up because of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, generally, if nothing else, my main takeaway from what I caught of the panel is thank God all of these actors seem to get along.
Hmm.
Because you never know. Like,
And well,
for all we know, John Bishop could have been a really awkward addition, and it
Hmm.
turned out that they didn't gel. But at the
well,
least,
it's
the
and it's
interactions we see, they did.
and it's still perfectly possible because these people are actors.
Yeah, I mean,
So
Yeah.
they say they get along well together, but yeah, it's true, we don't necessarily know.
Well, it wasn't even necessarily going by anything they said so much as just the
It's just the
general
energy as well.
demeanor of the,
They did
the
say it
energy of the
too.
room.
I did find it funny that what's his name again? You just said his name and it already is out of my head.
John Bishop.
John Bishop.
John Bishop was saying how on the previous show he was working on, he was with Bradley Walsh, and I think he was kind of insinuating that he had already known he was cast but wasn't allowed to say anything yet, and he was just bombarding him with questions about what it was like to work on Doctor Who, to the point where he was like thinking Bradley might think he was a little obsessive about it. But then as soon as the announcement went live, he immediately got a text like, "This is the best job you'll ever have," or something from Bradley Walsh.
Bradley Walsh probably saw the announcement and went, "Oh." Because when you've been cast but it hasn't been announced, you're under a very strict NDA.
Yeah.
So you can't tell your friends, you can't tell other people in the business, you can't even tell other people that are working on that show.
Like most actors that come like will be like, there was one family member or literally one friend that knew, because you need somebody to talk to during that year or 6 months or whatever. And other than that, they did not speak to a single soul about what they were doing.
Yeah, the one family member that happened to be in the room when you got the call or something.
Right.
I think it was like they were doing a charity thing together or something. And then it
Maybe.
was like but I forget if it was like asking him what it was like working on the show or just about Doctor Who in general, because maybe he's like not as big a fan as like other people that have been on the show. I don't know.
Well, that's
like
the
it
thing.
didn't seem like he was completely like oblivious to it or anything, but
Yeah, well, if you take a look, who's known anything about Doctor Who in the show has been all around the scale. I mean, on one end, you've got people like Peter Capaldi and David Tennant, who watched the show as a kid, who loved the show as a kid,
right,
who was basically living their dream by being in the show. And then on the other hand, you've got people like Catherine Tate and Matt Smith, who are like, Doctor Who?
The one constant we've had since 2005 is that the showrunner, the most visible producer that we see at all of these interviews, has always been someone who's been a fan of Doctor Who since childhood. However, I think like people like Julie Gardner and such, I don't know, and not to single her out because I don't know much about her, but she's of these hidden non-public executive producers, she's the only one whose name that I know off the top of my head. I don't know necessarily if they were as big Doctor Who fans as your RTD, your Moffat, your Chibnall.
I don't think they were as big, but I think they at least knew the show decently. But for them, it was probably, this was a this was a show ran for 26 seasons.
Right, and of course, especially
ratings until the end,
especially for people middle-aged and older in Britain, there was probably quite a period of their life where it was the only thing on at a certain time of the week, because in 70s Britain, I don't think you had all that many channels.
You had 4 or 5.
Right.
You had BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three.
As compared to when I grew up, they were just starting to transition from, okay, we had 70 channels, now we're going to go to 170, now we're going to go to 270 every couple of years.
Yeah, but back then you might not have had BBC Three then, it might have just been BBC One and BBC Two. but then you had the Independents, which at that time were separate broadcast companies in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the London broadcast was Thames. And I only remember that because I remember the frickin' logo from like the beginning of Danger Mouse. Wow, that takes me back. Um, but all of those companies eventually banded together and became ITV.
Mm.
And I think you have BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three, ITV, Channel 4, and then you've got cable networks.
So when the Avengers was airing, it wasn't technically ITV. It was maybe like affiliates or whatever.
It wasn't ITV at the time. It was what became ITV. It just
Mm-hmm.
depends on wait, I'm streaming. I can't look it up. Damn it. It really depends on what region it was originally filmed in. Because the Independents did have something akin to syndication, where they would then sell that show to other independent stations.
I'm trying to look up the Avengers on Wikipedia, and all I'm getting is Marvel.
All I'm getting, well, it says original network ITV/ABC/Thames.
So it was
Thames.
Thames.
It was
Okay.
Thames. Yeah, it was Thames. And damn it, every time I hear that, I hear the little trumpet thing doing the. Yeah. Yeah. This is part of my childhood. I didn't even live in England. This is part of my childhood.
Because you watched all of the stuff we imported, it seems.
It does. It really does. I preferred British shows to American shows back then because most American shows were crap.
And I was thinking that company sounded familiar. They also did Mr. Bean.
Yes. Because, like I said, that was the independent station for the London, for basically southern and southeastern England. That was the station. And then I know the Midlands had their own. And then the North had their own. And I think Wales had their own. And then Scotland had their own. And eventually they said, this is stupid. With our powers combined, we'll become Captain ITV. Speaking of stupid American shows. Anyway, we are way off topic. Is there anything more you want to say about...
kind of are.
Yeah.
Is there anything more you want to say about this?
Honestly, I guess it was just kind of funny watching it and, like, seeing both Chibnall take the piss out of himself in a way, but also, like, the other actors kind of ribbing him by, like, constantly trying to, like, stepping on eggshells of, like, oh, how far can I go before he's gonna shoot down what I'm saying.
It's funny occasionally just like watching Mandipgale talk, and even when Chibnall like wasn't on camera because of the way it was it was like a 4-camera setup, so sometimes we'd be zoomed in, and you could tell she'd be looking over at Chibnall every word, waiting for him to do the cut it off motion or something.
I would be a total ass on something like that because I would talk, and then I'd start patting myself down and then waiting for someone to ask what the fuck I'm doing.
Looking for the red dot.
I'm looking for the red dots. Yes.
I think that might be something Mark Ruffalo lives with nowadays.
No, the red dots only appear if he picks up a phone.
Yeah, it was just kind of funny because I just started even in my own head just thinking it's like, oh, it's like Chibnall is just one of those characters who's like, I'll never tell.
Yeah, he was definitely the least animated on the panel, but he made sure to go out with a bang because that swarm hint definitely was the first thing to pick up headlines across the globe.
So there's a difference too. If you think about interviews with Russell T, he was always very excited.
Yeah.
He was always very excited, very energetic. And if you think about Stephen Moffat, he was calmer, but still enthusiastic.
Hmm.
Chibnall
Yeah.
just kind of
Now I'm imagining if there was an interview. I guess if it was RTD, David Tennant, Billy Piper, and John Barrowman on stage, Billy would probably be the closest thing to the calm one on stage.
yes. And Barrowman would be all over the place,
Yes.
Hmm.
probably with his tongue in somebody's ear.
God.
Barrowman.
As long as it was only his tongue, because he's
Yeah,
gotten in enough trouble.
yeah.
Anyway, I think that's a segue.
Have we
Yeah.
have we beaten this panel to death?
I think we've covered
Yeah.
everything I had on my mind to talk about, unless sounds like Thomas as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, the only other piece of news we have, there was a bit I did read about the fact that they were filming in the harbor in Wales on a Chinese boat. That might be some finishing shots for one of the episodes. Other than that, the only thing we have is Big Finish new releases, and there's only one of those. They are releasing Torchwood, Madam I'm by James Goss, starring Samuel Barnett, Brian Dick, and Dervla Kirwan, who none of which were actually on Torchwood.
Mm-hmm.
So
those are all the original Big Finish characters.
Mm-hmm. A whole lot of not caring for me.
Right.
And that's all the news we have. So that takes us up to Geek Talk. And first up is Bill,
Yes.
who wants to talk about Star Wars The Clone Wars.
Yes. So this is the basically the last half of the original run, and by that I don't mean Gendy Tartakovsky. I mean of the Cartoon Network / Disney show, not to be confused with season 7, which aired like 2 years ago or something like that. So this is seasons 4, 5, and 6. And basically at this point, the writing I think is a bit strong. The writing and animation I think are a bit stronger because the team knows what they're doing. The show has found its footing. It's not like seasons 1 and 2 where they're like, well, are we writing this too young? Are we writing it not, too mature? They know where they are at this point. There's a few different threads going on. There's basically the kind of meandering, world-setting, toy commercial, basically existing for its own sake sort of episodes, which I think would be the biggest criticism of keeping a Clone Wars series. I mean, the biggest criticism of the show existing in the first place, but especially for running this many seasons. The only reason that they can even kind of get away with it is the fact that they would split up Ahsoka, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and R2-D2 and Padme to each go on their own adventures at the same time. And even then, funny enough, at the point when StarWars.com just says watch it in linear order, I found areas there where no, actually they were aired out of order. That's one of the things where StarWars.com should have actually told me to watch it in a different order, and they didn't. Now that I'm watching it all at once, I'm realizing how little of the show I originally watched when I first watched it. I see now why people are such big fans of Hondo Onaka. I thought he was only in like 2 episodes, but he's in like virtually the entire 5th season, I think. Just doing one thing after another and being entertaining whenever he's there. When it gets toward the end, there's there's the one plot is basically, oh yeah, Ahsoka's not in episode 6, so we need to explain that. There's some stuff that you could only do because this aired after Revenge of the Sith, by which I mean it's kind of hinting at Order 66 and things like that. Some of it kind of just I mean, even watching Attack of the Clones, people are like, the Jedi, should be more suspicious of the clones than they are. They're being really gullible here for the sake of convenience, and there's a little bit of that. But it really highlights like, that something deadly is coming. But I think it would have taken a lot of the punch out of Revenge of the Sith if it had aired back in 2004. So that's why I said it had to be after. Because there's basically a clone kind of investigating this brainwashing that they've gone through and trying to figure out what's going on, while the Sith try to keep the Jedi from figuring it out. And then the final story that's actually aired in this is uh, basically because people will call everything a plot hole, and it's basically Yoda figuring out how to live after death, like we've seen in every movie since then. Um, and I guess it was kind of well done. I don't know if we needed that story, um, especially since they don't use the W word. Of course, almost like they're intentionally fucking with longtime fans. They do not use the word wills, and of course, they just want to keep people guessing. That was probably an order from George himself. Um, that said, from my understanding, the latter half of season 6 would have been really good, but just watching storyboards on the video is not something that I've been able to bring myself to do, even when those were released. So, especially since they pretty much treat anything in those non-animated storyboards as not happening anyway, so there's no point. Um, so I guess from what I've said, the latter half of the Clone Wars is kind of a mixed bag in that there's some really good stuff there, but there's definitely stuff that feels kind of like, well, yeah, there's definitely padding, which is inevitable when you get a show running that long about a 3-year war. Um, it's entertaining at least. I would say
Yeah,
the only.
try going
Hmm?
10 seasons about a 3-year war. That's how long MASH was.
Ah. Um. And yeah, so I almost would say pick and choose what you watch. But if you get this far in the show, you'd probably just watch all the way. And of course, the next thing I'll be watching is the season 7, which aired just a few years ago, as I mentioned, and I have not seen it all. But people say it's really good, so that I'm kind of looking forward to see what they did with it.
All right. You done?
Yep.
All right. So, that's the Clone Wars. Moving on to what I watched this week, unfortunately. So, just to see what all the hubbub is about, I watched the new Masters of the Universe series written by Kevin Smith. Masters of the Universe Revelation. It's on Netflix. Kevin Smith touted this as a continuation to the original 80s cartoon. And he made a lot of promises about it. He lied. Basically, this is they've only released 5 episodes out of 10. They're kind of doing that half season thing that Netflix likes to do, where they release half a season and then they release another half a season a few months later. With this half season, it's pretty much 90% about Tila and less than 10% about He-Man.
I've heard people say that's why it's not He-Man and Thee anymore.
Yeah. But knowing those characters, because I was a huge fan in the 80s, they are not really acting that in character. First of all, Kevin Smith somehow managed to suck all the joy out of this series. And I mean all of it. Any jokes that are made fall flat and just basically make a scene awkward. And everything that made it enjoyable is just gone. Instead, you've got a lot of what does plague modern stuff, a lot of drama. Two, and I'm about to spoiler some shit, people, because I think you'd rather hear me talk about it than watch this. Kevin Smith kills He-Man within the first 20 minutes of the series.
Like literally or figuratively?
Literally.
Hmm.
And right before he dies, he spoilers his big secret that he's actually Prince Adam. Which, instead of being sad for losing her friend, Teela goes on this rage-fueled I quit binge because freaking Adam kept a secret from her. Really? That's not the Teela I remember. And a lot of characters they introduce backstory for seems to be the backstory from other sources. Comic books, the 2002 series, etc. So, some of that's a little confusing as to why they've added them. Plus, Kevin Smith is doing to this what Transformers the movie did to the Transformers franchise, only shittier. I think over the course of the series, 3-4 of the background heroes of Eternia get killed. Just straight up died. And actually 2 of them were background. One of them was fairly upfront. Since I'm spoilering, I'm going to tell you more. Spoiler alert. He freaking kills Orko, who was a comic relief character, but one of the main comic relief characters. He was one of the 4 people that originally knew He-Man's secret. And yeah, it just freaking kills him. It's kind of starting to feel like, yeah, I'm going to kill all the people in this series and repopulate it with my own figures to sell. Because, fuck you, Mattel. Two, and then finally he makes all the old pre-existing characters basically useless. Albeit a lot of them are villains and were useless already, but still, it's like the only competent people in there are Teela and her new partner.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of annoying to me, and because in the old series everybody had their moment in the sun. Actually, I will take that back. Man-at-Arms has a few badass moments. But I think only 2. Adam is seen as completely worthless when Adam, because they eventually go to the afterlife and find Adam, and he's still considered, basically worthless. Skeletor is voiced by Mark Hamill, who's basically doing his Joker voice. Without the laugh, but it's like, is that Mark Hamill doing his Joker voice? Immediately came to mind when he started speaking. And I looked it up, and yes, it was. So, that kind of distracted me a little bit. I mean, I'm not expecting someone to be able to do the old Skeletor voice, but I wish he could have done something a little different from Joker, so it wasn't as intrusive. Other than that, they got a lot of star power for this, but it really fails to materialize into anything. A lot of favoritism in the casting, I noticed. There was a cameo appearance by a villain, Stinkor, who Kevin Smith apparently got Jason Mewes to do. And I noticed Kevin Smith's daughter has a voice in there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot.
I mean, you could even argue You could even argue Mark Hamill is kind of like Kevin Smith, just being like, well, this is who I want because he has worked with him
Because
before.
Mark
Yeah,
At
Hamill
least
and
once.
Diedrich
I was gonna
Bader.
say
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mark Hamill was in Jay and Silent Bob.
Strike
So
Back. Yeah.
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
And so, all in all, this kind of feels like Kevin Smith basically just kind of took Masters of the Universe and just kind of squandered it. I'm probably still going to watch the second half, but I don't hold a lot of hope for it.
So when I see people talking about a Masters of the Universe movie, are they referring to this just wrongly, or is there also a movie?
Netflix is working on a new. It's supposed to be a reboot Masters of the Universe.
Gotcha. So
Um,
this is supposed to be like a continuation, and that's supposed to be a reboot.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Hmm. Because I was gonna say the only Masters of the Universe movie I'm aware of is the one from the '80s.
Yeah, the
Oh
that
no, yeah, I knew that
Live
wasn't what
action
people were
one.
talking about.
no, Netflix
Yeah.
has two Masters of the Universe things in production. This one hit first. And the other
Hmm.
one I think is supposed to be either later this year or early next year. I can't remember which.
Hmm. I mean, it'll be interesting if I watch this just from my perspective as someone who grew up on the 2002 version of He-Man rather than the 80s one, which I could never sit through because my god, that intro is just dull.
The thing about
But
it, once
you
you get
know,
to the intro, many of the episodes were well written, formulaic but
mm,
well written.
yeah,
Especially considering Filmation was a studio that was well known for the cheapness of its thing, but
mm,
writing was never their weak point. Filmation was the same company that also did Star Trek the Animated Series, and they had some pretty good
yeah,
writers in that. Um,
um,
they also had some crap writers, but that's kind of par for the course. But
mm,
um, the thing about the '80s is it's literally dripping with '80s cheese. The animation's cheap. The voice acting is mediocre, but the writing was good, which is actually one of the things that I frequently say about Doctor Who.
mm,
And one thing I will say about this is the animation is beautiful. You notice that they call it a Netflix original anime series. It is literally like anime cell quality, not the
mm,
current. And I think it's not really. I think it is actually modern Flash animation, but done
mm,
very, very well. So it looks
yeah,
like old cell animation.
mm,
Um, it looks fairly awesome. It's just the writing. It looks fairly awesome. It's voice acted fairly well. It's
mm,
the writing that kills it. And for that, I blame this solely on Kevin Smith, who will, of course, defend this vocally till the ends of the earth. But I'm sorry, Kevin, you don't have a leg to stand on. Okay. But, like I said, I will hold judgment until the final 5 episodes are out.
mm.
Now, moving on. I believe, Thomas, you wanted to talk about Black Widow.
Yes, I did manage to get to watch Black Widow due to a viewing party. Because like hell, I was paying for Premiere Access. um, but yeah, it was kind of funny because I had seen mixed thoughts going into this. And it was funny because I was almost like, is my internet going to hold up enough to be a part of this viewing party? Oh, well, fuck it. I'll give it a shot. And thankfully, my internet held up. And it was just like, I could see to a point, I could maybe see where people have issues with it. And I mean, is it like, oh my god, best Marvel movie ever? No. But I was fairly entertained throughout. I mean, of course, this also isn't the original version of this movie, as far as I'm aware, because, I mean, a Black Widow movie is essentially been in development hell for ages.
Mhm.
For about 3-4 years,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I know that after it came out on Disney Plus, like Disney Plus Premier Access or something, I was seeing like articles doing the rounds of like people involved admitting to rewrites after the Me Too movement happened, and that influenced the script somewhat, which I think is more of like, and like in a way it is, while they don't go there, it's a lot more like metaphor. Um, and like really with Black Widow's situation, it kind of lends itself to that kind of theming anyway.
Considering
Um,
the entire Black Widow program's existence, I would think that sort of theme is extremely relevant. Yes.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's like, fine. They were like, oh right, yeah, that would actually make sense for theming. So yeah. Um, but yeah, ultimately, I think it was a good movie. I will say one knock I had against it was, my god, is the front half really front loaded with action. Like when it finally calmed the fuck down, I was like, oh thank god, a moment to breathe, because it's just like there's a good, like it feels to a point like they packed like a shit ton of action into it. Like, I mean, like there's a quiet bit, but then it feels like there's a shit ton of action, and then you finally get another quiet bit, and I'm like, oh thank god. Like there aren't many breathers for a while, and then you get a decent length breather, and then it
So it's
kicks
almost
back in again.
backward. They start with the action and then bring in the drama afterward.
Um, I mean, like the actual like opening in the movie is a bit slow, but then actiony, and then like a bit slow again. But it's like the slow bits aren't as long as I might have liked, or at least when the action like really starts going, it's fairly, at least from recollection, this was like a one-time watch. So I'm going off like almost a week ago now, I think. Um, it just felt like it was like nonstop, and like it was like it was bad enough that I became aware of it. Then I was like, whoa, okay, we're gonna get a moment to like chill the fuck out for a minute. And then yeah, like eventually it gets to that point, and I'm like, oh thank god, like a proper 20-minute, maybe it was only 15 or so, like breather, and it was like, oh thank god, I needed this. Um, and yeah, then it goes through to the end, and like, um, it's an interesting way, um, to give Black Widow a send off, given when it's set between Civil War and Infinity War. Um, and I will say, for those wondering how the character from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, who was supposed to show up in this first and then that, factors into anything, she's in the post-credit scene, and
I,
that's it.
I think that's the one scene I've seen explicit spoilers about.
Yeah, she's in the post credits, and that's it. So it's not like a big spoiler for the movie, really, because you could very easily miss it if you don't bother with the post credits. I
Oh,
won't
I,
go
I,
into
I
I
think
won't
I
go
know
into
who.
detail about what,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. Like yeah, I won't go into detail about what the post credit scene actually is, but that is where that character that was supposed to technically debut in this and then show up in Falcon and Winter Soldier, like yeah,
I've I've heard that
that's
scene
where she is.
foreshadows events of an upcoming Disney Plus show.
That doesn't surprise me. It also wouldn't
Hmm.
surprise me if we see her more in upcoming MCU movies too.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, uh,
it seems like she's the anti-Nick Fury of Phase 4.
yep.
Hmm.
Do you have more to say before I ask some questions?
Um, I will say it was kind of funny because the person I watched it through hated it, but was like putting it on for other people to watch, and it was I didn't know what the hell I was gonna think, but I came out of it pleasantly surprised. Like I enjoyed it. Again, is it a top tier Marvel movie? No, but I do not think it's like bottom of the barrel either. It's at the very least like in the middle, leaning towards the top half, I would say. And funnily enough, I do agree with other people who've said that Florence Pugh kind of steals the show for Scarlett Johansson. So, um, yeah, that was also funny because I've seen her in a few other things, but not much. But she
That's
does
right. Yeah,
very,
I
very
remember
good.
seeing the line, somebody tweet out they called it Black Widow, not Natasha Romanoff's Black Widow. Oh, basically implying that Florence Pugh is the true star of the movie.
I mean, it is technically following Natasha, but like it's one of those things of like this other actress is so interesting that she kind of one ups the star of the show.
Okay, so the first question I have about it is if this movie did come out before Infinity War, when I believe it's set, would it have had the right impact, or is there anything about it that in the story that gives it reason to be Phase 4? Other than, I guess, that post credit scene.
Honestly, I feel like this actually would have been better to have before Endgame at the very least. Um, because like I mean, while it doesn't hurt to have it after, given what happens in Endgame, it would have been nice if it had been able to come out
Right, okay.
before. Um, Even if it was like an in between. Though I guess that's also the thing. If it came out like, let's say, Captain Marvel was shifted around and this came out between Infinity War and Endgame, then ultimately what happens to her in Endgame is like, well, that's kind of telegraphing it. We'll
Gotcha.
quickly crank out her movie before she leaves the MCU, sort of a thing.
Mm,
But it's like, and I it would not surprise me if they were just like they really wanted it to come out before that, but it like it got
right.
production got held up and all this and that and whatever and um you know I mean like that's happened before. I mean Ant-Man was supposed to be in the original Avengers movie and that never happened. So
Makes sense considering
mm,
Hank Pym was a founding Avenger in the
yeah.
60s, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. But yeah,
Before
like
before Cap.
yeah, it was like it's one of those things where I'm glad we got the movie at all, mainly just because I actually liked it.
Okay.
Um, but it does feel like there would have been a lot more weight to the fate of Natasha if this had come out prior, because it really
Mm,
does feel like the only thing that benefits from having it this late is just basically the post credits.
gotcha.
Um
And my other question is most of the criticism that I've seen that wasn't from outright misogynists has been about a certain character that I think everyone knows he's in the movie, but I'm not saying his name in case it's a spoiler. I don't know whether he's the big bad or not, but I know he a certain villain that fights in the movie, and you probably know who I'm talking about. Do you think criticism of that character was justified, or do you think it's mostly baseless?
Uh,
Or I'll say his name if you need me to, but I think I gave enough.
let's just say, talking about the character would kind of I know I have a good idea of who you mean, but uh I don't know much about the character outside of the movie. So watching it, I was like, the only connection my brain could make is, so is this like Marvel's Prometheus? um but yeah, like I can't, yeah, it's like I'm like very much fan of the movies first. I'll read up on comic lore if I want,
Mm-hmm.
sort of a person. Um, I don't really, I mean, like, I've, bitched before about depictions of certain DC characters because of like other stuff I've seen of them or read up about them that I'm like, oh, this is more interesting than whatever the movie did.
Right.
Um, but in this particular case, what they did for that character was, it fit the movie.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned,
That's the most important part.
if so long as it fits the story they're telling. And again, the MCU is never going to be 100% fucking
Yeah,
accurate.
the MCU is
never will
it's
be.
its own thing. It's
Yeah.
one
I
part
mean,
one
like,
part 616, one part ultimate, one part whatever the fuck the writers are feeling at that given moment in time, one part internal politics.
yeah. I mean, like, James Gunn effectively ignored and changed, like when he was doing the Guardians of the Galaxy, basically was like, okay, I'm just gonna like not go by the comics necessarily. Like, he took bits and pieces, and like Rocket Raccoon, the main
Mm-hmm.
shift that I'm aware of is just that he went from having a British accent to an American. Um but otherwise was basically the same. But like Peter Quill, I remember being described as like basically Captain America in space in the comics. And basically James Gunn is like, nah, fuck it, he's Han Solo. So like, the MCU is not trying to be
I know
comic accurate.
fans of
And
the
the
Guardian.
comics are still
I know
there.
fans of the Guardian comics want Chris Pratt. Damn it! I was too focused on coming up with the actor's name that the character's name flipped my head. Chris Pratt's James Quill to be bisexual. So
I mean, I
apparently
could
that's
see it.
well. I mean that people partially want that because he's buying the comics, partially because the actor goes to a super homophobic church. Apparently, so.
Right, yeah, it goes to like a mega church or something. um yeah, I would generally say, I'll put it this way. Would I say that it's worth paying for premiere access on Disney Plus to watch Black Widow? Probably not, no. I would wait until it's out and you can just watch it normally on Disney Plus. Um unless you're like a family, so like $30 to
you'd
cover a
save
movie for the
money
whole thing. Yeah.
from going to the theater, because
Yeah.
I look at that $30 price and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
Coming from some place that where the main theater that I went to is AMC, I'm like, okay, so that's one ticket to the main theater plus a popcorn and a small soda, and I can buy a 2-liter soda and a box of Orville and Redenbacher for like $4.
Hmm. Yeah, ultimately, I'd say it's just worth seeing for
Yep.
yourself to form your own opinion.
I
All
look
right.
forward to cases getting down so that I can see what the theater in Athens is like.
Okay,
Yes,
so you guys have
time,
gone overtime.
time for the summary.
Yep.
Yep.
Let me load up a timer. Um, and I'm ready when you are.
Yep.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, we open on the end of whatever the previous Dalek story was, and that the Doctor has locked them away in some time loop. Only for the TARDIS to be surrounded suddenly by a bunch of, actually decent TARDISes that are apparently outfitted with weaponry and shit like that. The Doctor and Charlie try to get away, because it is very clearly that they are wanting Charlie for something. But Charlie basically goes, "No, fuck you, I have agency," and throws them right back into the line of fire, and they get picked up, and we find out that there is the reason they want Charlie primarily, Romana and all the other Time Lords involved with this, is because there's some anti-time universe thing that seems to be seeping into their universe that they want to deal with, and the only way to get there is through Charlie. And once they do get there, shit basically goes to absolute hell, and they get into taking a fake tomb of Rassilon back to Gallifrey, with Romana having to stay behind as a bargaining chip, and the Doctor just being left there. And it turns out this fake Rassilon tomb actually has a bunch of anti-time energy in it that starts to influence. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but starts to influence the guy who's basically now the acting Time Lord president.
Vansel.
Vansel, that's it. Thank you. And he just starts going ahead with what turns out to be the plot of these Never people, who are actually Time Lords who have been killed off essentially, and
Erased from
ended up,
existence.
yeah, erased from existence entirely, and ended up in this anti-time universe. And as everything, like, yeah, they're trying to essentially wipe out all of existence through what they're doing, ultimately to try and get revenge on the living, as it were. And ultimately, Vansel is able to overcome the influence on himself to buy Romana enough time to get into the Matrix to try and install something, but she can't because the Matrix is just too fucked up from everything that's going on. The Doctor is given the option to shoot Charlie to rectify everything in one go, basically, because if she's not there, then there's no link. But he refuses and instead ends up basically materializing his TARDIS around either the God, it materializes his TARDIS around something revolving around this and just lets
Oh,
it
the
absorb
time station.
the
Yeah.
time station and allows it to absorb the impact of the blast essentially to save everyone. With Charlie ending up fine and Romana able to escape the Matrix, severing the link to the anti-time universe. But as a result of what he did, the Doctor is now uh, full to the brim with all this anti-time energy and declares himself to now be Zagreus.
All right. And I take it that's the end?
Yep.
You did that in just under 5 minutes.
I'm surprised I didn't go over because there's a lot of like,
Well,
oh god, I've seen this twice,
I
but
had to
I'm
tab
blanking
back to the
now.
stopwatch, and by that point it was like 5 minutes, 2 seconds, so you were just under. All right. So, let's talk about what we liked about the episode. And Bill, you are first.
I am first. Okay.
50-50 chance, Bill. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I was looking into details of the episode, and that was just not at end of that. Yeah. Anyway, I always like stories that deal with like alternate universes and uh non-universes and things of that nature, and I think this is no exception. It's really limited to Gallifrey, but even still, it really I like the way that that it's dealing with these questions of where do things go when you erase them from time, and what that universe is. So that was a really interesting to explore.
All right.
Hmm.
Thomas?
um, ooh, let's see. I guess I just liked having listened to it's sort of there in Chimes of Midnight, but having listened to that and then going back and listening to Storm Warning and then this, I kind of like how, at least to me with this three, like I'm assuming there's probably more in between where it comes
There's a
up,
Mm.
few.
unless this is direct. Yeah. Um, but as of right now, even just from what limited stuff I've listened to, this kind of feels like The Impossible Girl done way better to a point. Like I was just like the
Like a
longer
decade
I
earlier.
yeah. Like that's what's funny. Like when I was listening to it, it's like, so did Stephen Moffat just kind of listen to this and go, "Oh, that's a fun mechanic," and just do his own take on that or something?
Well, Moffat
Because
was involved with Big Finish a little bit, so wouldn't
mm,
surprise me.
yeah, because it also like I guess it also sort of gave me like I was thinking like just because I've seen more of New Who than I have of that I've listened to Big Finish, it was very much like this is almost like the Name of the Doctor and Face the Raven, like as one thing.
Hmm.
um to an extent because like, Charlie actually is just like actually willing to face consequences. But I guess even to that point it's almost like hell bent done right. Even though like Charlie doesn't die, like she's at least, and there's at least consequences for the Doctor's actions in the shit that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah.
All right. So as for myself, um, I think I'm gonna have to go with our mains performances. Um,
Hmm.
because almost everybody in here not only had to play themselves, but play a anti-time simulacrum, and I could always tell the difference.
Hmm.
Unlike our complaints in Chimes of Midnight, where the person possessed sounded just like the person, here you could tell the difference between themselves and their anti-time equivalents. Even though it was
Hmm.
somebody just stealing their face and voice.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
you could always tell when it was Charlie and when it was her,
Hmm.
and that made a load of difference to me.
It was interesting that
Yeah.
anti-time puts a reverb filter over your voice.
Mm-hmm. Well, Big Finish had to do what they could.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
guess even then you even have the vision in the Matrix with Romana essentially playing an evil version of herself.
mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, the dictatorial Romana from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody got to kind of play at least one dark version of themselves, so that was kind of cool. Plus, you have, of
Hmm.
course, Paul McGann at the very end being infused with anti-time, playing almost evil Doctor.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that made it an interesting challenge for the actors, and I thought they did a pretty good job with it.
Hmm.
I would like to take a moment out to discuss something that was bandied around prior to the podcast, and that is the similarities between this and a certain series.
Loki.
Yes.
Hmm.
So, as anybody knows, we've talked about Loki and how the TVA seemed to be basically like as if Douglas Adams wrote the Time Lords, or more point, as if the creator of Rick and Morty wrote the Time Lords.
Hmm.
Because it does seem to be a cross between the Time Lords of Gallifrey and the Council of Ricks. Here, and their whole purpose is to weed out these variants to keep the timeline safe and static. Of which, what did they call it when they sent them to when they got rid of variants?
Pruning.
The
Pruning. Yes.
yeah.
Here, you have the Time Lords of Gallifrey maintaining a same kind of static time and taking care of dissidents by dispersal.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And both winds up not really killing them but sending them to some other time,
Which
place, dimension.
Yeah.
which I swear I remember somebody in Classic Who being dispersed, but I couldn't recall. Like I thought it was the War Chief, then I looked it
Um.
up and that wasn't true.
No, they threatened to disperse the Doctor in Deadly Assassin.
Ah,
Yeah. The war games, the villains from it basically are that they get wiped from
okay. So not the War Chief,
history.
not the War Chief himself, but his minions
Yeah.
were.
The war lord who was above him, the
Mm-hmm.
non-time lord involved in it.
Mm-hmm. They get away from
Uh,
existence. They don't necessarily use the term dispersed, but I
yeah.
believe the Doctor was threatened with dispersal. Although I think it was called vaporization back then.
Um.
Uh,
Yeah. Like yeah, I think the Doctor almost has it happen to him in either the fifth Doctor era. Might have been Arc of Infinity.
mm-hmm.
It almost happens, but he ends up actually being sent into the Matrix or something
Yeah.
instead.
And it's supposed to, and the Fourth Doctor nearly gets it, but um, he then runs for president, which makes him ineligible to be punished until after the election.
Hmm.
Very interesting little twist in Time Lord policies. But um, but yes, the similarities between these two makes me wonder if somebody had listened to this that worked on
Hmm.
Loki, because it does seem to be,
Hmm.
a very much doing the same thing. I could actually hear it. I was in the kitchen making my lunches when I heard that bit, and I'm just like, wow, that does sound a bit Loki-ish.
It's
Yeah. The
If
the
if
eye.
someone was a little bit more camp, I would have been I would have been like, yeah, this is uncomfortably close. As it is, I can just kind of believe that it's a coincidence, but I would also believe it if you said that it was not.
Yeah, at the very least, it would not surprise me if they'd heard it and like subconsciously were influenced by it. Like it wasn't necessarily like a conscious effort to be like, "Ooh, let's do a Marvel version of this." Like it might have just been that it was something that they had listened to and were like, just like without even realizing it, being
Mhm.
influenced by it.
It is possible. I'm not 100% certain, but yeah, it does. There is some
Hmm.
very big similarities. All right, let's move on to what we didn't like about it. And Bill, you are first.
So I felt that it kind of lacked vision. I know that this is the first of several episodes that end up happening in the antiverse. I believe Scherzo is the next that involves it, although I haven't listened to Scherzo yet.
That Skirzo starts a series
Right, yeah.
in which, and I will spoiler this, in which the Doctor and Charlie are trapped in
hmm
a universe without time.
So is that the antiverse or is it something
I
else?
don't think it's the antiverse. I think it's a separate, a different, separate universe
Gotcha.
where time doesn't exist. But I will talk about my opinions on that when
Okay.
we.
When did we get there?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this is very much like it was kind of just the same universe, except it was populated by people who had been dispersed. Um, and I don't know, especially with the way they talked about it, looking at their instruments, they're like, "Oh, what is it like? Time only stands still in that wreck of a TARDIS, uh, et cetera, et cetera." I kind of wish that they had taken that sort of energy and put it into more of the story. And I get that there's only so much you can do in an audio and so
Hmm.
much you can do in an hour. But I really wish that there was more of that rather than things just being kind of, oh yeah, we're basically just on another alien world that happens to have a toxic form of energy that they're going to blow up Gallifrey with.
I mean,
All right,
especially given this is like what, 2.5 hours long, almost.
something like that. It was only 2 episodes, but they were long episodes.
Yeah, yeah. Like the first episode is basically an hour and a half.
Mm. Yeah, I was like, this seems to be going on a while. I'm gonna
Hmm.
go make dinner. Yeah. All right. Anyway, Thomas, what are your thoughts?
um, trying to narrow down. I guess the the ultimate plan is very like, ah, like after last week, where it was very much just, oh, I'm doing this because fuck you, I want to actually like have an existence. This is just like where it does just go into fuck it, I'm just going to destroy all life forever, and it's like I can kind of get, and even to a point, it seems really weird that the primary never person pushing this is someone who inflicted this existence upon themselves. So it's not like it doesn't carry as much weight as if the guiding person had been someone who like just had been dispersed.
It's basically
Like,
someone who turned around at the high point of their career and said, "Oh shit, I'm the bad cop," killed themselves, then gathered up an army in hell and decided to destroy the world with that army, kind of.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just like if it had been someone who was just like literally any of the other characters of the Never people that we see, where it was they were dispersed
If it
and
was
it was
somebody like Morbius or
Mm.
some Time Lord arch criminal.
Mm.
I don't want to say the master because he's still at
Yeah.
large, but
Mm-hmm.
somebody of
Mm.
that quality, somebody I mean, the reason I bring up Morbius is he's supposed to be this horrible dictator in Time Lord history
Mm.
who was
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
overthrown. Um, so
Mm.
a monster like him would do something like this, but
Yeah. Like,
really seems like they kind of ran out of idea and said, okay, we'll just use villainous plot number 23.
yeah. Like, it really was like, if it had been. Like, the funny thing is, I wouldn't have even, like, necessarily needed it to be someone who was a villain in life, just someone who felt wronged and was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
fuck everyone then.
And
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been stuck in this existence because I was maybe like, I was fairly innocent, but they got rid of me anyway. And then, like, well, fuck everything then. Or like, and even just like if it was targeted towards specifically Gallifrey and not like, well, fuck all of existence.
Mhm. What I
um
think would have helped is, like I mentioned, if they had done more with the concept of the antiverse. Because if they were
mm,
basically like, we're trapped in this subpar universe, but if we destroyed the web of time, that would allow us to live as equals with everybody else. And the Time
mm,
Lords were like, yeah, but it would cause all kinds of untold havoc. And they're like, yeah, but it would
mm.
allow us to live as equals with everybody else. At least that's a sort of conflict with a
That
gray
that
area.
that is what
Yeah.
they were trying to do. Because the Doctor mentions that the result of that breaking the web of time would basically be the Empire of Zagreus.
Except they
Mm.
turned it into a revenge plot,
Yes.
which made it a
Mm.
lot more black and white.
Yeah.
Now, I could understand it if, instead of this person, it had been like the original person that was the, experimental subject for vaporization way back in the day
Mm.
and had
Mm.
been there, for untold
Mm.
ages.
Yeah. So essentially the omega of
Yeah, and had grown
this sort of
twisted
thing.
and yeah,
Yeah.
because all he was a damn tech or something.
Mm.
Had kind of like the Doctor Manhattan accident, only he wound up in anti-time.
Mm.
Somebody like that I could see pulling off a revenge scheme just because of
Mhm.
how long he's been there, how twisted he was. But
Yeah.
the people they had doing it, no, were completely wrong for the role.
Mm.
And were you done, Thomas?
Yeah.
So what I didn't like is in places this really did feel like it dragged a bit.
Mm.
Um, there was a couple of times I had to rewind it because I spaced out for a moment. Um, just because it was like slow, slow, slow. Then event happened, and then we're back to slow. It's like, what the fuck had just happened? What did I
Yeah.
miss?
Yeah, like there was literally a chunk near the end of part 1 where upon my listening to it a second time, I was like, I have no memory of this section.
Yeah, and that's probably because you spaced while it happened, or you were easily
Yeah.
distracted by something.
Yeah.
I think the reason I had to rewind it is I had to respond to somebody's text message. But it's
Ah.
it's nothing's happening, so your brain just kind of tunes it out.
Mm.
The bit where they're prepping, they're just arrested the Doctor and prepping people seems to take forever in my book. And yeah,
Mm.
I think this could have been used a little bit more trimming.
Mm.
Probably,
Or
maybe cut it down to 2 hours.
yeah. Or even specifically like rather than having two very long parts, like having split it into essentially like I guess the equivalent of 5 parts.
I think part of it is also like they used a lot of conversation to just set up who Van Cell was and what his character was like. Um,
Mm,
and a lot of that just it feels like it's not going anywhere, but it's all
yeah.
entirely so that you have something to judge him off of later on and to
Mm,
feel like he's the bad guy or whatever. Um, but it really drags and adds to the time, and
yeah.
that I think they could have done something different with.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like while you can't get across visually, like with any visual cues of, oh, well, this is a thing about this character, you could still, rather than having to have the doctor be like, ah, yes, you, I remember you, you can basically just have him go, oh, this asshole. And then, like, ta da.
Especially
In like a sentence.
especially since his character is basically CIA Time Lord number 523. He
Mm,
doesn't really have that unique of a personality that he needed all that time.
yeah.
Hmm.
All
Like
right.
friggin' like most of the Time Lords in Classic Who that the Doctor was like on name terms with was just like, ah, yes, you know, I remember you from blank, and then that would be about it. Or just like the fact that how they would interact, of like whether it was a positive or a negative interaction, would be enough.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, and instead we get, 5-10 minutes of the Doctor trying to remember this guy's name from the Academy days.
yeah.
Right.
Um, all right. I would just like to take another moment here to point out um, how interesting it is that Big Finish went from the Doctor having all the Daleks trapped in a time pocket to where we got in the actual series with the Daleks nearly destroying Gallifrey.
Right. Although it's funny because as I was listening to this, I had forgotten that part, and I was like, "Oh, that doesn't age well." But then Van Cell and Romana are bickering over whether or not to basically like destroy causality by attacking the Daleks or to let them loose and be as it is. And I was like, whoever won that argument started the Time War.
Yeah, that takes it
mm,
off the Doctor's hands and puts it in Romana's.
Mhm.
mm.
So that was kind of interesting.
Or in Rassilon's, depending on what happens in Skurzo. I don't know what
Mm.
happens in that story.
I do believe it's still President Romana through that. I'm pretty sure. Um, I it's been a while though. I can't remember that clearly. I did listen to all of these like 20 years ago. So,
When they came out.
a little bit after.
Hmm.
Um, it was a little while after, but it was still within like Big Finish's first 100.
That actually reminds me. This is something Thomas and I were talking about before the podcast. It's a little divergent, but it's still on topic. And so at this point, when coming into this story, what was your opinion of Rassilon as a person, as a fan who had not yet seen the RTD era?
Oh, I knew that Rassilon was supposed to be a dick. Um, because if you remember the Five Doctors, um, they discovered that it was actually Rassilon that invented the time scoop, and the whole death zone was all his idea to basic.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I just kept associating him with the scene at the end with Barusa, but I hadn't thought about the fact that if it was the game of Rassilon, that would mean the time scoop was his as well.
Yep, he is a giant douche, and I mean, prior to the Five Doctors, you only heard the name Rassilon in passing.
Mm.
Um, you never saw him. You only heard of him as a figure in Time Lord history, usually listed as a great figure.
And
But
you knew
Mm.
every artifact on Gallifrey was named after him.
except for the Hand of Omega, which would come into play later. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, pretty much the two big figures in Time Lord history were Omega and Rassilon. And Omega got
Hmm.
trapped in a black hole and went evil. And apparently Rassilon was a dark fuck anyway, which we didn't find out till the Five Doctors. Um. So yeah, I knew he was an asshole prior to this. Um. And prior to the RTD era, because yeah, so showing Rassilon as he was, just didn't change his real personality, just made him more badass. What I think changed his personality was his appearance in the Capaldi era.
Hmm.
Yeah, I hope we get some redemption for that. Not in the sense of moral redemption, but in the sense of him coming back to the strength we expect him at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that would be an interesting idea for the 60th.
Now we go into favorite scenes, right?
Correct.
All right. So this is a bit of a cliche, but the scene basically where the doctor slash not Charlie reveal the actual plot that's going on. Uh, Up to that point, you're listening. You're like, okay, this is all. I mean, it's not going well for the doctor, but it's going too smoothly. For some reason, these anti-time people and Van Cell are getting along really well. When does the other foot drop? What is going on? Um, and then do you get to that build up, and it's oh yeah, no, that's actually just a bomb. And of course, like any doctor actor, Paul McGann delivers that revelation absolutely perfectly.
Yep, that's a good scene. Thomas.
Um, I'm gonna go with the scene closer to the end with, well, I say closer to the end, but at least in part 2, that when the TARDIS kind of craps out
Oh
and the
god damn
doctor's
it.
like, oh yes, yeah, it's like the doctor is like, oh yes, Roma, can you help me with this? And they basically have like
A,
a
co-
hushed
a
convo.
hushed conversation while bitching about the doctor's tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my favorite scene, and you stole it. God damn it! I'm like, there's only two people ahead of me. I might get that scene. Nope.
Hmm. In hindsight, I'm realizing I probably had another one, but like I blanked on it, so I ended up going with that.
God damn it. I think my favorite scene before that would have been early on in episode 1, where they're getting surrounded by the battle TARDISes, and they're telling the doctor to stand down, and the doctor's kind of like, no thank you. It's impossible to get out of here. Watch this, how I get out of here.
Yeah.
Like, what? Why aren't you giving up? Because I'm the doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter why they're trying to stop me.
Mm.
It's impossible. Yeah,
Well,
yes.
although a few seconds later he reveals he knows exactly why they tried to stop him, but still the moment is great.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
And
You'll do this. Hold my tea.
um, in hindsight, the one that I was probably meaning to go with first was probably like after that, where the doctor's trying to like shove her off onto a thing to get her out
Party
of the way.
planet.
Yeah, yeah, to get her out of the way, and she's like, "No, fuck you! I choose agency."
The planet
like
that
flips the switch.
the planet that Ford Prefect would consider the high point of his career to be stranded on.
Yes, quite possibly might make his home.
Hmm.
And Charlie's just like,
Yeah,
nope.
yeah. It's like,
So
no,
if I
fuck you!
remember, if I
actually
flip
want
the
to be in the
switch, we go
story.
back to where we were. Flip.
uh,
All right, so this takes us to our least favorite scenes.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the scene where Romana gives up way too easily to Van Sel's plot. Uh,
Curse
it
your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
right. It's not even. I mean, it is, but it's like I get that if this were in person, we might see people posturing with stasers and such. But in audio, basically, he's just like, "Oh yeah, Romano's going to stay here, and I'm going to go back and become president." Ha 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 ha! This was my evil plan all along. And she's just like, "Oh, screw you," and then just does exactly what he says without resisting in any way. And I wish she resisted at least a little bit.
mm,
You know, it seems a little out of character to just roll over and die that way.
Yeah, because she's Romana.
Right.
This is
right.
not just a president. This is one of the Doctor's companions.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
And
has
it's like
it. Go ahead.
it's especially weird, given that my first, well, actually no, it wasn't my first, but like, that I have seen Creature from the Pit, where one of my favorite bits was when those guys sort of capture her, and then she's basically like giving them shit. It's like, fuck
And
you, I'm out of here.
it's the exact opposite of the scene we were just talking about where I never give up. I'm going, because I'm the
Yeah.
doctor. She graduated from being a companion. She traveled with him for 3 seasons, got married to him in a computer commercial, all of that. So she should have all that spark, all that refusal to surrender built up in her just as much as any other companion, and
Mm.
just does not.
Yeah, it's like, and you will stay here. No, I will not, because I have a gun. Oh, poopy. That's
Or
basically
even
the scene in a nutshell.
yeah, if the bodyguards were a little, even just they spoke up and made it very clear that their loyalty was to Vancell and not to the president.
Yeah, if
During the course of that scene, that would have made a
you heard
difference.
like the buzz of something of stasers being readied or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
But
mean, like the one that's told to escort Romana is like, ah, yes, with pleasure, and the
But
doctor basically had,
that's
yeah,
after she gives up. Like
yeah.
she just assumes that they're going to follow his orders. She doesn't even try to tell
Well,
them.
yeah.
I mean, she doesn't even say something like, "I'm your president. You know, you must obey me or drop your weapons or anything like
Mm,
that." She just assumes.
she doesn't
yeah.
even
I
try
mean,
threatening them with a jelly baby. I mean, come on. That's what the fourth doctor would have done in that position.
What's that over there? Oh, it's just a jelly baby. Run!
Now all of you want to stand down or I'll destroy you with this deadly jelly baby. Yeah. Yeah, it's completely out of character for Romana. Makes
Mm.
you wonder if the presidency is just kind of beating her down. But
I mean, if the tone came off like she was like she clearly had a plan, then maybe that would have been a bit better. Like, no, 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 I'll just go along quietly because I'm figuring out a way out of this.
Right.
on that same note, ow, my back's starting to hurt. Um, my least favorite scene is the one where Vansel starts talking to what supposedly is Rassilon's stasis pod. And nobody
Mm.
on his bridge, they're all so devotedly loyal that not one of them goes, okay, weirded out now. Not one.
Mm. And they're not under the influence of the
Not yet.
thing yet. Yeah.
They're,
So.
but yeah, it's kind of like, Charlie's even pointing it out, and they're all just sitting there going, "Nope, nope, nope, nope. This is fine."
Like you half expect one of them to go, "Oh, he's always been like that."
You should see him in front of a mirror. Yeah, that kind of thing. But they don't, and it's just, I don't know. It's just creepy. Because you think, with the amount of people that would man a bridge, there'd be at least one person going, "Nope." Even if he was then gunned down by one of the other guys, it would have been nice to have that one person go, "Okay, no, that's wrong. That's not right." And then, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I believe we are up to our final thoughts. Bill.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, this is a really interesting story to listen to, uh, in the context of Modern Who and the context of modern TV. It definitely feels like it was groundbreaking for the time, given how many things we've just talked about cribbed from it. And again, not this isn't okay. So I was wrong, and it was wrong when I thought this was the first time Rassilon ever spoke. But this is definitely the first time Rassilon was a meaningful character and not a part of the scenery, and had a dialogue with the Doctor, and that is still.
No, he did talk to the Doctor in the Five Doctors.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that because do not recall him having that big of a physical role.
It's only one scene,
Hmm.
but it's a long scene though.
Either way, at minimum, this doubles the amount of Rassilon we had gotten in Doctor Who, not counting novels to that point. I don't know anything about the novels.
The novels don't count.
Right. And of course, the next time we would see him on screen would be the end of time. So, however you cut it, this was a game changer. There's also the fact, and this is probably a good time to mention it. This was the in story, and of course, I through reading lore, I didn't experience it firsthand. But this story aired a year and a half before its sequel, almost. And during that time, New Who was announced, and there was the people who speak about having been fans of Big Finish at that time talk about not knowing if they were ever going to see an Eighth Doctor story again. So this was seen as a potential end of the Eighth Doctor's story. And it's really...
That is something I'm going to talk about next week.
Okay. And yeah, it's definitely a game change, or definitely something to think about in that regard. I do think it needed the following story. I think that makes it a lot stronger, and I don't want to talk about that too much. But this is a very good lead-in to what is essentially the finale of the Charlotte Pollard arc, or the Impossible Girl is a different thing, but whatever you want to call it. The storyline started in Storm Warning. This is the beginning of the end of that storyline.
The Paradox Girl arc.
Yes, exactly. And it's a strong penultimate story of that arc. And I will leave it at that because I'm getting rambly.
All right. Thomas?
Well, I can definitely say that I'm glad that I took your advice and listened
to Storm Warning.
Yeah, and listen to Storm Warning first, because like literally the first few seconds of this, I'm like, oh, yep.
Yeah, it would have been really confusing.
So it's just like, oh, good. And there's like references that would have completely gone over my head, because they're callbacks to Storm Warning here and there. So it's like, yeah, good thing I've listened to that first.
So that means
Yeah.
that, by the way, people, this means that Thomas has actually listened to 3 full Big Finish
Mhm.
audios now.
Yep. Maybe next week
Hmm.
he can give a review of Shame for Storm Warning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Oof. I. It's interesting because like with the Chimes of Midnight, by comparison, that one I was like completely invested in to the point that I listened to it 3 times. This I was so distracted by other stuff that I didn't listen to this until like 2 in the morning this morning. So I was kind of out of it as well. So it was like, oh shit, I really shouldn't be listening to it when I'm this tired, but I want to get at least 2 listens in before the podcast starts.
That's dangerous because I've
Um
done that before and fallen asleep listening to it.
oh yeah, I almost did. And I was like, oh no, I have to like play a video game to keep myself awake. Um and like drank some Coke as well to like give me a bit of leeway before I would conk out. But yeah, it was like good thing I did listen to it a second time because otherwise I would have been fucked. Yeah, it was like this. I feel the first half doesn't hold my attention anywhere near as well as the second, and it really does feel like it would have, as well as like maybe trimming some of the fat, also just like maybe not having it like go a full hour and a half, it feels like, before the first cliffhanger. Probably not the best idea.
Yeah, there were plenty of places that they could have put minor cliffhangers that would have been great as
Yeah.
episode enders. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what they were thinking.
Hmm. Like, especially as something this long, giving yourself more breaks allows for people to be like, okay, I need to step away from this a bit to do stuff that would make it so I can't concentrate. And, I can just listen to like the first 2 parts and then stop and then come back later or something like that. Rather than having to go a full hour and a half before being like, okay, there it is, and then stopping. Like I didn't even realize at first that this was only divided into 2 parts, so that was very much like, holy shit, this is going a while,
Yeah.
before it finally did end, and like finally got to the hearing the music and being like, oh shit, that went on for a while. um so yeah, it's, yeah, definitely a thing of like, could have used a bit more breaks here and there, but yeah, like the stronger elements of it keep it from going like knocking it too much, and generally the acting is very good. But yeah, there is some stuff in there that's just like, like, whereas last week I was teetering on almost giving it a 5, this is like, oh no. This is teetering down a bit, even though there are bits that are like, oh, okay, now they're really piquing my interest. But yeah, like I'd still recommend people listen, like give this a listen, but like maybe like take a break. Like artificially give yourself a break from part 1, just because otherwise, yeah.
I think at this point, Big Finish was trying to give the writers more creative freedom and not force them to follow the classic cliffhanger format. But it basically
Mm,
sounds from your thoughts like that sort of backfired on them.
It did.
yeah. Like there's a reason I have said, like, even for New Who, that I almost wish New Who just used the Sarah Jane Adventures format. Because like after a while it just kind of goes, well, this is going a while, isn't it?
All right. Are you done?
Yeah.
I do have to agree with Thomas that this did seem to stretch a bit long. And in some places it was long and slow. And when it gets long and slow, my attention kind of wavers. And I have that problem here. I think I had the problem when I first listened to it. It just gets a bit to the point where you're just stopped caring for a bit, and and your just brain focuses on other things. The acting is superb. Um, the writing, like I said, could have been trimmed. Um, really, that's all I can say, since there's no visual aspect. Somebody needed to trim it down a bit, and I think it was either the writer or the director. So let's rate this. Bill.
I'm going to say 4.0.
4.0. Thomas.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Bill and give it a 4 as well.
All right. And I have to drop mine from last week and give it a 3.5. So that will average it out to a 3.8. Which will put it in our rankings at, whoa, slow down. At 230 out of 396 things reviewed. It is on par with Big Finish The Red House. And that seems to be it. It is not as good as, or it's better than Big Finish Master, Big Finish War Doctor the Innocent, Big Finish Fourth Doctor Adventure the Evil One, and is not as good as Big Finish Main Range the Condemned, or Big Finish Jago and Lightfoot Revival Acts 1 and 2. So there you have it. Once again, 230 out of 396. That is all we have to say about Big Finish Neverland.
So please let us know in the YouTube comments, what do you think about this story? Especially if you listened to it in 2002. And yeah, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to get our exports on YouTube every Monday, or follow us on Twitch to get our streams every Tuesday night.
All right, so next week we're going to do the epilogue to this, as we will go for another Big Finish, and we are going to deal with Zagreus, written by Gary Russell and Alan Barnes, and starring Paul McGann as the Eighth Doctor, India Fisher as Charlie Pollard, and guests. See you next week.
Yeah.